may have in all of this. So it's a
Well, let me just speak on that for a second, because I also sit on the Community Impact Board, and we've had a lot of discussions on planning and the needs for plans, and we've had discussions of how all of a sudden a road becomes an emergency. And we go, well, where's plans been? Are they been on the shelf, or we just didn't look at it? You know, somewhere down the line, either the city or the town or county council and that, we haven't planned, or we haven't dusted off the plans that somebody has paid for so that UDOT can make their plans. I mean, when we have a community come up and say it's going to be 50 homes, that may have an impact on UDOT's road. Why should you as a community have to foot the bill for the access into that development? You know, we make the developers paid for that, but as they come in to redo the roads, if they know those plans are coming, they try to design the road with that so that we've automatically got it in there. So community driven, will be involved as much as you want us to be, but we won't make the decision. We'll just take all the facts, we'll make that with that. But, I mean, Brandon's good at his job. He knows the process very well. And when we get all done, we'll know what's doable and what the price tag is. And if we're going to let the price tag dictate, you know, the next 20 years, then we got to figure out how we can do that. So I think it's been long enough. We need to move forward. And again, having come from county government, I know that you can't please everybody. But once the decision's made, as a team, we go move forward and we make the best that we can out of it. And I can say that I am concerned if we do a lot with Main Street. Other towns in the state of Utah have died because they've moved the traffic flow off of Main Street. And I don't want to see that happen. And so as a city, you need to decide, merchant-wise, do we want to risk what foot traffic you get from people going down Main Street? I'll just say 35 years ago, I just got into the trucking business, and out on the street here in Heber City, trucks were not welcome to stop on Main Street. You painted everything red. And so the mentality has stayed there for years and years. Once in a while you see them stop to get food items or something, but they're going to the outskirts because that message is still there. They didn't want trucking traffic there. And so I don't want to see that happen with our tourists, because now we have a bypass. They bypass your town, and now the Main Street dies because they don't have the foot traffic. So those things will be studied as far as what are the actual economic impacts that this route will cause, or this one will. So we'll do a good job at it. I'm very comfortable with it.
So are there any additional questions from the council members? Because we do want to give the public a chance to ask some questions. So any additional comments or questions? Okay. Well, we'll move into the next stage. So residents, business owners, please feel free to ask your question. We'll need to make sure from the meeting recording standpoint that you speak into the mic. So there's one right here.
name and address, or name?
Yes, please state your name and you want the address as well.
My name is Ramona Mehmet, and I'm on the Wallsburg Town Council. My question, the process looks amazing, like you've done a very good job of putting your process together. I just wonder why we're only in the planning phase now, since you had mentioned it had been on the horizon for almost 30 years.
That's a good question, and as I mentioned, we've had several, there have been several starts and stops. That does come back down to the funding and desire to actually move something forward. In the past, we've started down the path, and then there's been discussions and some resistance at times, and so we'll stop and say, okay, we'll put this on the shelf. We'll revisit it later. So there was enough momentum with Mayor Potter and the county council to start, and Mr. Davis to move, let's really take a hard look. We've got a lot of growth coming. We need to know, what can be done, if anything. Let's get moving on it. So there was I think growth had played a big part in moving this forward.
Thank you.
Thank you. David Halleck. Quick question on RFQ.
Can you say your address too?
Halleck, what was that?
Address too.
122 South 3 East.
Just for the record, they're wanting that.
Oh, perfect. In the RFQ process, is there ability for public input on the RFQ process, or is that entirely internal to UDOT?
That's entirely internal to us. We're, as Brandon mentioned, we're on the hook for to do the study. So, but at the same time, he did mention, we want to hear, are there things that we need to add or incorporate as we put that RFQ together? And so that's something you can relay, definitely relay back to your elected officials, and we can take a look at that.
My name is Wendy Casey. I'm a resident of the county. 1777 Edwards Lane is my address. I wanted to go back to what Councilwoman Franco was discussing with Brandon. She was asking, well, I want to ask further the involvement that UDOT has with the independent consultant for the EIS study. Brandon had said that they will have weekly meetings and updates, and he basically said they would be all up in their business. And so I'm wondering, does UDOT go in with a plan of what they want on a route, and then the independent consultant has their route? I mean, is it really going to be an independent study?
Yes, it will be an independent study. This process is a data-driven process. Otherwise, we're filtering. You're skewing the information. In order for this to be fair and objective, we have to let the data speak for itself and analyze it from that standpoint. Otherwise, we're not allowing for a fair and open process.
Okay, so what if during the study the independent consultant goes to UDOT and says, this is how it has to be, and UDOT totally disagrees? What happens there?
If it's not supported by data, it's not going to happen. And this may provide comfort to the room or panic, I'm not sure. But I've assigned myself to this project because I got hired by UDOT in 2003. And the idea of the Heber Valley bypass, as it's been called, was on the table back then. And so there's not going to be any project or any alternative that's going to be identified or furthered that's not supported by data and facts.
What about public opinion?
Public opinion is important, but I just want to be really honest about that. And that's a good point. And this is always a hard thing for people to understand and just follow. This is not a popularity contest. This is not a vote. This is there a transportation need? Yes or no? If the answer to that is yes, what are those solutions? And do those solutions pass the criteria that meet the need? And if the answer to that is we have some alternatives that can help, then we'll further those. UDOT doesn't have an agenda. And I don't have an agenda. I mean, if we don't build anything, fine, I'm going to sleep fine at night. But I think there's been a need that's been identified and talked about for many, many years, and it's not going to be driven by the consultant. It's going to be driven by facts. The community input is going to be super helpful, but at the same time, there's those laws that are going to have an impact on the outcome, right? There's the Clean Water Act, there's the Historic Preservation Act, there's those other things that we're going to have to balance. But the whole intent is to provide a facility that's going to enhance and help the community. And again, the no build is an option.
Okay, thank you.
So my name is Dan Edwards. I live on Casper. So I kind of follow up on a question that was asked earlier about what, years ago there was the proposal of the bypass going on the east side of Heber, and many developments have happened, and that bypass route closed up because of developments. I see this EIS study taking some time. What's Heber City Council doing? You probably can answer this, but my question is to Heber City Council, what are they doing to prepare to preserve the corridor for this? Because the corridor closed on the east side.
Someone from the city council want to answer that?
City council.
Well, it's more county. I'll hit it. I'll let the counties.
Well, over the intervening years, between the city development and the county corridor preservation fund that we established several years ago, a good portion of the route that we've been looking at, now whether that comes out in the study or not, I guess that'll yet to be told, but a good portion of the route that we've kind of looked at over the years has already been acquired. It's owned by the city or the county already. So development obviously won't go in, we won't put development on that that's already there.
Last night, Brooke and Heber City Council. Last night, we had a joint meeting with Heber City and the planning on major development, the Sorensen property, whatever. That was a couple-hour meeting. Then at 7 o'clock, the Planning Commission started their couple-hour meeting. I went home about 10:30 after some little bit of talk after. But in that meeting, a major development along Midway, the Midway route, have invested and have been talking to us for several months, but they happened to own the property. It was called Zeb Annexation, and it's now something else, Tracy. What is it?
Spring Creek Parkway.
Spring Creek Parkway. And they own the property where the school district is proposing to put a high school. They own quite a bit of other property, and where at least 2 of the 3 early routes to deal with the wetlands were identified through their property. But they want to develop. And it was discussed by our planning commission, and the concerns about traffic and the high school and the bypass and everything else. And they were pretty much told now, it may come to the city council on the 16th of July. I'm not sure how that'll be handled. But they were told that probably this will be put on, we just aren't ready to annex them. There's a lot of push to do that, and they've got money invested. But I think there's the backbone in the city council, I hope so, there is with me, to say to them, sorry, and we'll help when you're ready, we're ready, you're ready. But I think there's the will to not plug up the routes. Is that a fair statement? I kind of wished our school district was just as willing to think about it, but I'm guessing maybe not. We'll see how if they bond and go ahead in November if it passes. That was part of our discussion last night. We don't know what the school's going to do. It's going to add major traffic, whether there'll be an exit on that road off of the bypass that you'll look at, whether that's feasible or not, how that will affect, and all of that. So maybe the citizens will say we don't want that there, and that's a school thing. But we're trying to be sensitive to it, I believe, our planning commission and our city council and mayor are trying to be sensitive. I believe that the city in the past kind of plugged up some of the alternatives to go over to Highway 40, which they hadn't. It's past history. Maybe we've learned from it. We plugged some holes that now aren't feasible.
You illustrated a really important point, though. going back to growth, the amount of, when we started the planning, the corridor planning study, we were looking at the growth projections. I mean, the Heber Valley area is going to double in population. So where are those people going to go? So if if that's the case, how are they going to get to where they want to go? So it's kind of that chicken and the egg thing. There's a lot, and this isn't unique to Heber. This is something that Utah is struggling with. I can't tell you how many emails I respond to about we've got Pleasant Grove, the interchange is backing up. Why aren't you doing anything about it? We are. We're just growing so fast that it's exceeded our ability to catch it, to maintain or maybe get ahead of it. And you guys are experiencing that very same type of pressure.
Does that?
I'm afraid that we're starting to get a little too much into the weeds. I don't want to stop anybody's ability to ask a question, but I request that UDOT to come have this meeting with us and have an education for not just the public, but for the elected officials, particularly, on what the process is and the next steps. One thing that we can do is, once the consultant is brought on, we can have another meeting like this where we get more into the details of these specific type of things. What do we do if X, Y, Z happens with ABC development? At this point, what I really asked UDOT to come out and do tonight, along with MAG and inviting the senator to come and witness the conversation as well, is that we understand the process that we're going to be going through, and we understand that we have opportunities for input, and we will be able to make changes, or I don't want to say changes. We will have the ability to have input, and they will listen to our input. Does that mean that what I want to happen absolutely is going to happen? No. But collectively, what we all want to have happen, we can influence the route of this bypass. What I don't want to do is get into a position where we're beating up on UDOT again. They've been very generous to come out again. And so I've been very grateful for them to do that. So the overview is what we really want to learn about tonight. Once they hire the consultant, then we can have another meeting such as this, and whatever we need after, we keep requesting. If we didn't learn something the first time, or we felt like they didn't answer our questions, or we didn't know the answer, give them the opportunity to learn about it, come back, and answer our questions. UDOT has committed to communicating with us thoroughly throughout this process, and I think that's what we really want to focus on tonight, is these big points, and try not to get too much into these details if we can. That's just my advice.
Yeah, and I think that's a really good point. But as we move into this NEPA process, this is not a land use study. This isn't, we're not doing land use planning. We are taking the land use plan from the community, and we're going to try to further that and implement that with a transportation system that will support that. So we are not doing land use planning. That's the local government's job by state law, and it should be, in my opinion. You guys, the community, should have an opinion and have a say on how your community develops. So this is a transportation system that's going to support the adopted land use plan for your community. It's not a study to come up with alternatives on, if we did this, what would happen? So we're not coming in and trying to dictate the future of your community. We're coming in with a transportation system to support your vision.
Just one more question I thought of. How much will the study that's done right now with the 2 recommended routes, how much will that affect the scoping and the purpose of need with those 2 recommended routes in the current study?
I think it's going to inform it a lot, because none of that is throwaway. So we've got a lot of public opinion. Those lines on those maps that everyone's seen were put there with a lot of thought behind them, but that's not where we're going to stop. We're going to take those into consideration, but we're going to bring into that a lot more information. We're going to bring into that some further traffic analysis, for example. We're going to bring into that some more defined wetland delineations. We're going to bring into that some more traffic projections in the future.
Sure, but are you going to come up with any more routes based on data, or are you going to stick with the 2 that have been recommended at this point?
We very may well come up with new routes. No, that's not, we're not going to limit ourselves to what's in that. We're going to be open. We're going to identify the need. What is the need? What are we trying to accomplish? How can we accomplish that? And we're not going to put blinders on. We're going to keep moving forward with more information and what makes sense.
That's why at the beginning of the meeting, we said, what you see in the planning study is not set in stone. We mean it. So we're asking, as awkward as it sounds, we are asking for a little bit of trust on your end that we mean what we say.
I'm going to go next. I've been waiting for a while. I'm Christina. I live on 450 North, I think. I was late, so I'm sorry if I missed the first 30 minutes, and you already said this and that, and part of what I'm going to say comes from because I was coming from work. But is this study only going to be about a new road, or is it also going to be about a possible transportation system that might actually run down to Provo or over to Park City or anything like that? Is that included in the scope of the study, or is it only a road?
Have Jeremy answer that.
So, as Brandon mentioned, we'll be identifying a transportation need and then finding the solution for that. Well, not finding a need, we'll be identifying and determining together what that need is. We're not going to go fishing for a need. We got enough things to work on. We don't need to go find needs. But it will not incorporate going down into Utah County or up into Summit County or anything like that. It'll be focused on the Heber Valley. That'll be the scope of this environmental study. So, did that answer your question?
Yes. Just so you know, there is currently going to be a study looking at public transportation into Utah County and all at the same time.
I'm just going to repeat what Mayor Potter just said. I'm Celeste Johnson, Midway Mayor. There is a study that is going to be done looking at transportation from Summit County, Wasatch County, Utah County. It's in conjunction, Mountain Land Association is spearheading that with UTA and the 3 counties. So that's a separate study.
But to that point, that's something that as the environmental, the Parkway environmental study moves forward, that's data. What that study does and identifies, we'll also coordinate and see what data that gives us, because that helps us make a better decision.
One other thing I would say while I have the microphone, I think it can feel a little bit confusing to hear the county and the city own the majority of the land where this is going to go. And then here, we don't know where this is going to go. So I think the critical piece that you shared at the beginning is that this is not set in stone. Land can be sold, other land can be acquired. Just because we own some land does not mean that's where this road goes. And I think that gets a little convoluted sometimes.
Thank you for the clarification.
This is a process question. You mentioned that this is about Heber Valley. I know that the problem on Main Street has driven this and calling it a bypass. There's been other public I've heard said, well, are we going far enough north to deal with the problem, where Heber's going north clear to the, the end of the county almost? So in our meeting last night, the consultant suggested that the traffic now on Highway 40 going on out north of Heber and on out is about 25,000 a day and projected to be 50,000 if Sorensen develops like it's looking like. So are you looking at all this study? I know is about the problem here, but might UDOT want to look at studying the Highway 40, and if we can even get out of the valley, we may be bypassing around the city and can't get to Salt Lake or Park City. I know you said we're not looking at those beyond, but within Heber Valley, I'm just suggesting that Highway 40 may become a real issue too.
We'll take that into consideration as part of the study analysis.
That's the question, and it'll be looked at.
Spencer Park, Wasatch County Council. Have you guys ever been through a project where you identified the need, but it was 15, 20 years away? A lot of our concern, I think, is we need to identify an alignment. Have you ever been through this process, identified a need, and then went ahead and said, you know, we're not going to build it for 10, 15 years, but we're going to go ahead and put funding together to start purchasing the right-of-way, start working in that direction? But I think that would help a lot of our situation, even if the need is out there at a distance.
Yes, you know, for example, Mountain View Corridor is one, you know, that's actually a phased approach where, and it's being built in sections, and it's been under construction in various legs over the past 10 years. And we continue, Provo Canyon, very similar. You know, we now have a project identified. I want to say the 22-ish, yeah, to bring that next widening of Provo Canyon up to the junction with Charleston. So yeah, these things have to take that long-term look. So yeah, we definitely have that long-term view as we look at these studies.
All right, I think we're done. All right, one of the things I was going to comment also along that same lines, as we've been talking about it over the last few years, and initially UDOT was reluctant to move forward because they didn't see the need, and that was what the planning study was supposed to demonstrate enough to move forward. But I think there was enough recognition of all of the confusion and uncertainty in the community from communication with UDOT, you know, through elected officials, through the public, to say, yeah, it's worth funding this right now, even if this road is, I don't think anyone's anticipating it in less than 10 years, at least from anything anyone I've talked to. But at least we'll have some certainty so that when schools and different types of things are going in. I think the elected officials previously tried really hard to preserve that corridor, so what didn't happen on the west side, what had happened on the east side, and so it would be a cheaper process when it happened. There wouldn't have to be a lot of things torn out. But now we're seeing that the process is more complex, and they couldn't have possibly known what the environmental study would be until it really happened. And so I think everyone's done a good faith effort to move forward, and now we're at this point. And thank you so much for coming. I think that was very helpful, and we appreciate your willingness to work with us.